I'm Rufus Gifford. So thrilled actually to be moderating this extraordinary panel. So in this space, I have been Senate confirmed twice. I was the United States ambassador to the Kingdom of Denmark. You may have heard a little bit about Denmark and Greenland over the course of the last several months. You may know I have extraordinary strong feelings about the topic. And in the first bit of the Biden presidency, I was chief of protocol of the United States, which is essentially means that I was sort of a primary liaison between foreign governments, foreign leaders, and the Biden administration on the soft power side, in essence. So it coordinated all the state visits, all the visits, if anytime the president, first lady, or vice president interacted with their counterparts. So I say all that by way of background. It's what I come to this conversation with. I care very, very much about the American role in the world, American leadership globally, and frankly, am tremendously disturbed by the unraveling of American leadership, especially over the course of the last 120 days. So let me introduce our panel here. Our first, truly, none of our panel needs any introduction here. Our first is former Representative Adam Kinzinger, former member of Congress and Lieutenant Colonel of the Air National Guard. Our second panelist, who only goes by one name, his name is Jolly. Combat vet, social media activist, and former military intel collector. We have Jason Kander, Afghan vet, podcast host, and former Secretary of State of Missouri, is with us here today. And we have Janessa Goldbeck, a Marine Corps vet, and is going to speak on behalf of Vote Vets with us here today. So, all right. So, guys, we have so much to talk about in the limited time we have. And I'm just going to I'm going to start with Congressman Kinzinger and go to you first. So, look, I'm just going to throw out a few of these things. And I think every day throws another round of issues straight in our faces. So let's talk about Trump and Russia and Putin, the call yesterday, the fact that you are seeing the United States align with autocrats unlike we've seen before. We're talking about Canada poking our best allies in the eye. Again, potential military engagement in Greenland, this chaotic implementation of tariffs, which taking away all the economic arguments, which of course we could make here, also goes, in my mind, to erode trust between us and our best allies. Sending folks to or being willing at least to potentially send American citizens to a prison in El Salvador. Receiving being willing to receive a $400 million 747 from the government of Qatar, profiting for foreign investors investing in Trump's crypto scheme, and the first family clearly profiting from foreign investments in crypto. Talk about the insecure. All of us certainly have experience with secure communications. Think about the way folks like the Secretary of Defense and so many others have used Signal to talk about war plans, and Panama and so many others. So this is just scratching the surface. I know it is. This is a list of issues that I came up with quickly. Congressman Kinzinger, whether it's one of those or something something else, what should we be focused on right now? What are our greatest concerns, and what can we do about it?
Well, look, it's good to see everybody. The thing that I'm most personally concerned about overseas is the war in Ukraine. I mean, I think this has the potential of really redefining the world, honestly, and causing my kid to have to go to war someday, because we know that when America steps back, chaos follows, or Russia or China. Domestically, though, how are we, what's the best way to go after Trump in this moment? The thing I worry about so much is, with all this chaos that's happening, that we lose like our institutional morals, like the morals that we're kind of built with, that we just know is right and wrong. And when you have leaders that are like so unmoored from truth, we all of a sudden start spinning, right? People need leaders. And so I think the best thing to focus on frankly, is corruption. It's corruption, and it's on top of that, you tie it to the fact that Donald Trump and his family are profiting. I mean, remember they coined the term the Biden crime family. I mean, that's laughable in comparison to what's going on today. And and then I think pointing out the fact that at one point, and granted he's stepping away from the administration, but he's endemic of it. Elon Musk is standing on the stage of CPAC with a chainsaw. This is going to be the guy that's probably going to be the first trillionaire in the world. And he's telling you what you can live without. He's giggling while he's cutting the things that we need. So I think those are the big things. Obviously, veterans, stuff being cut. But I think the corruption is the thing that's going to tear through, because I think no matter who you are, corruption feels gross and you recognize that it's stealing from you. And so, but obviously as time goes on, we're going to see, we're inundated by this fire hose right now. And it's like, we're kind of like deflecting everything, and it feels like we can't go on offense.
Yeah, absolutely. Jolly, over to you from where you sit. It's obviously as a combat vet, how do you think about this? How are veterans feeling right now? And how should we be talking about some of the issues, some of the cuts? The congressman mentioned some of the Doge cuts and others. How should we, one, be communicating? How should we be talking about this? And what's the actual impact, both on the battlefield, both overseas, but also domestically with military families and veterans?
Yes. So number one, the oath that I took, that every veteran took, is the same oath the president takes to defend the Constitution, foreign and domestic. And the number one threat to our country right now is sitting in the White House. So he's, his everything he does, everything that Adam Kinzinger just mentioned, plus everything you mentioned in the leading up to the question, are the things that he's doing to undermine national security. But people are underestimating also. When you cut veteran benefits, when you fire veterans, when you're threatening our disability, when you're threatening our health care, when you're threatening our very existence, who wants to sign up and join a military that then won't take care of you once you're home? Now, this has been, the card the Republicans like to play is, well, there was VA issues before Donald Trump. There wasn't 80,000 VA employees getting fired until Donald Trump. There wasn't mass across the board firings of probationary employees, which are predominantly veterans who have stellar careers and resumes before Donald Trump. So, when I was in the military, when I first joined, we had to shine our boots because I'm old. And so, I hated the way the boot polish smelled, but some of my fellow veterans love the way it tastes, the way they're licking boots right now. So when I see veterans licking the boots of Donald Trump and kowtowing to the bullshit that he's saying when you know it's bullshit, when I see veterans who went overseas and saw the same shit that I saw, and then you come home and dare say that we're not in a democratic collapse. See, the beauty of deploying overseas is seeing things that you never would have saw from the podunk town that I grew up in, and that is what a country looks like an absolute democratic collapse. What a country looks like when it's being overran by organizations who seek a caliphate religious state. And I argue tooth and nail that the far right is seeking a Christian caliphate in this country, and that we are in absolute democratic collapse. When you don't obey a 9-0 unanimous decision by the Supreme Court, when you lock up judges, when you bring charges erroneously to a congresswoman who's doing her constitutionally protected job in the state she was elected in to do it in, we're in democratic collapse. And it's our job as veterans to be the voice to say, we will defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And if the guy in the White House won't uphold his oath of office, who will?
Thank you. That's I love that. I do. Jason, over to you. I think, based on your experience, obviously you've served. You see what's happening at DoD right now. You see the leadership of Secretary Hegseth, or lack of leadership of Secretary Hegseth, thumbing his nose at so many of these institutions, talking the way he deals with some of these extraordinarily secure systems. What's your sense as a vet? Like, how should we be thinking about this? How should we be talking about it? And I think so much of what we need to get our heads around too is how can we convince others that this stuff actually matters, and that's something that I struggle with every single day.
Yeah, I think the first thing to keep in mind is that when you think about it, the way Pete Hegseth is running the Pentagon right now, the only real reference point is action movies from the 80s and 90s. I mean, if you believe that a strong military is one where absolutely every person is, the one storming the castle. I mean, like that's what those movies taught us, right? Like, one of my favorite dumb movies of all time is Iron Eagle, where somebody, no offense to Adam and the Air Force, but where somebody launches an entire offensive without any use from us ground pounders, right? And like, we had a problem 20 years ago where Donald Rumsfeld thought that's how you did things, right? They were like, let's just send in some dudes in black pajamas and we're going to make everything work. Who cares if they have armor? And now we have like the worst version, the worst cousin of that running the country. And Pete Hegseth, who likes to say things like, oh, when we give any sort of training on diversity or sexual harassment or that sort of thing to our troops, we're somehow weakening them because otherwise they would be out figuring out how to aim their M4s better, which is just a complete fiction. Like, you show me the toughest warfighter in the military right now, and I will show you someone who spends 95% of their time in the military not doing that. And the point here is that we actually, prior to the Trump administration coming in, had the most lethal, the most effective, and by far the most professional military in the history of mankind. And so when you come in and decide, oh, well, we have this idea that the military should look like the one that Pete Hegseth wanted to be in but wasn't in, so they kicked him out for failure to conform to the environment. That's what we used to call it in officer candidate school. That's somehow what the military should look like. What you're doing is you're making us all less safe. Because you're running, it's ironic because they like to claim that wokeism is hurting the military. They're running a backward social experiment on the military where they kick out anybody who doesn't fit their central casting idea of what the military was supposed to look like in a Clint Eastwood movie. And all of a sudden we have a military that's not as strong, not as lethal, and not as effective as the most effective, lethal, and strong military in the history of the world, which is the one we had before Pete showed up.
Thank you for that. Absolutely. Janessa, over to you. So obviously you work for Vote Vets, and so the work that you do every day is talking about this issue, talking to vets. And so tell us how we should be, I think building on what the congressman, what Jolly, what Jason said, how should we be thinking about this? How should we be talking about it? How should we be amplifying these issues in a more effective way?
I think, starting with the frame that Congressman Kinzinger put out in terms of corruption is so important. Like, when you serve in the military, I served in the Marine Corps with people of all backgrounds, all stripes, all ideas and ideology, but you all know you're being held to the same standard. You're all sort of fighting towards the same common cause, whether or not you agree with each other on the politics of the day. And that sense that it is a meritocracy, which Pete Hegseth has come in and sort of made up is a new idea that he just invented, means that everyone is competing on an equal playing field. And this administration is not. They are robbing us. They are taking money out of our pockets, whether you're a veteran, a military family member, anybody, a senior on Medicaid. They are coming for our hard-earned dollars so that the richest people in the world can get richer. And I don't know, I read Alexander Navalny's autobiography after the election, and it doesn't have a happy ending, but the way he built political power in a time when people in Russia were feeling extraordinarily demoralized because of the situation they were in under an authoritarian regime was about highlighting corruption, highlighting how this administration, how the Russian oligarchy was not just enriching themselves, but doing so at the expense of everyone else. So when I think about the idea of, slashing 80,000 workers from the VA, when I think about the cuts to Medicaid that are on the table right now, when I think about how these tariffs are harming veteran small business owners and small business owners around the country, which we are hearing from veterans and their families all the time, every day, that this is real. These are the things that Democrats need to be talking about to highlight the differences between, these aren't just differences of ideas and policy. This is difference of how you govern and whether or not governance is about enriching the very rich already or actually helping people. And that isn't a right or left issue. I was just in Cedar Rapids, Iowa last week with Pete Buttigieg. We did an event out there, intentionally went to a part of the country where Democrats haven't necessarily performed well to talk with vets and military families about the issues that we're facing them. And we heard from a veteran who owns a chocolate shop in Cedar Rapids, and he's like, the price increase of Coco has rapidly bandied about in the last couple of months. How can I run a business without any sort of certainty? And we're seeing that not just, at a chocolate shop in Cedar Rapids, but all across the economy. So these are the things that we need to be highlighting. We need to make sure that we're going to places and having conversations in places outside of our traditional bubbles. That means being uncomfortable, being willing to be challenged. And I hope, and I've seen from all of the folks on this call, the willingness to do that, to be courageous and to have those conversations, because a lot of times people just have questions that they would like to have answered. And if we are ceding the ground in those spaces, then those questions are never getting aired and appropriately addressed.
No, I love that. It's so much of what we need to do is bring the issues that we understand as having served our country back home and to figure out how to translate that effectively. I love it. I do. So I want to talk just really briefly about kind of the American role in the world and how Donald Trump both essentially kind of rolling back. So the geopolitical isolation, which is essentially what American first foreign policy is, what that means, what it does, especially as he sort of very blatantly kind of pokes some of our best allies in the eye. And I want to read a message that I received from someone I don't know actually, but I got it on social media. And then Congressman, I'd love to, I'm here with 4 military veterans, so I'd love to get your thoughts on it. I bet all 4 of you served with Danes at one time or another because they're a phenomenal ally to the United States. Rufus Gifford, Danish Army officer here. When I served with American troops in Afghanistan in 2015, as a token of appreciation from a U.S. Army officer, I received the flag of the U.S. at the end of my deployment. This particular Stars and Stripes was given on behalf of Marco Rubio. The U.S. officer was from Florida and had flown in D.C. September 12, 2015. Do you know where I can return the American flag to? I don't want to keep it anymore, and I feel bad throwing it in the trash. So as the former ambassador to Denmark, when I received this message, I'm not kidding. I got emotional because this shit is actually, it is fucking, sorry, excuse me. I assume I can curse on here. It's fucking heartbreaking. Because
you're good. Say it. Preach.
Thank you. Because for the last 80 years, this has been what the American partnership, American leadership globally has been actually what made America great. And I'm curious, Congressman, starting with you, hearing stories like that, knowing that we've lost the hearts and minds of the men and women who have fought and died alongside all of you. How do we deal with that?
Yeah, and we basically shot ourselves in the nutsack for no reason, right? I mean, literally. And so it's the greatest self-inflicted wound. Here's 2 points. The first up, I always said in Congress, I said, because that's why I went into Congress, was the whole idea of America's role in the world. And I said, look, my view of our mission statement is simple. It's to be an example of self-governance to billions of people that don't have what we have, that are desperate for it. And I use that as the example, like the thing that actually took down the Soviet Union and destroyed the Iron Curtain. Yes, to an extent, it was our military and it was, bankrupting the Soviet Union. But in reality, it was our ideas, because we were bombarding our ideas over the Iron Curtain. And it was the 3rd generation that came along and said, screw this. We don't want to live in this tyranny. That's what America's example is. And so the other thing is this. There's this idea, and you saw this in Pete Hegseth's kind of dripping with contempt, signal chat. This idea that the world is freeloading off of us and we're doing a kind service to the world. Now, look, I think America as the world leader is the best option out there. But I want to be very clear. We didn't build the post-World War II order to be nice to everybody else. We built the post-World War II order to benefit us. There's a reason that we had a massive explosion of manufacturing in the United States in the 1950s, because manufacturing was destroyed all over the world. We were in a position to inherit a lot of that manufacturing, which is why we then became a chief exporter. There's a reason that we are in charge of freedom of navigation of the seas, because we've chosen to do that, because that allows us to write a lot of the rules that benefit us. And so when Pete Hegseth says, yeah, screw the Europeans, they're not doing enough. By the way, there were British and French ships there at that time, I want to point out. But the other thing is, we've told the Europeans that's a job we're going to do. We're going to be in charge of freedom of navigation of the seas. You guys can do what you can to help us. And so all this was built for our benefit. And so what we're doing right now is cutting our arms off so that we can say that we lost weight. And it's insane. And ultimately, the problem is we're going to realize this. The average American is going to realize this, and it's going to be almost impossible to correct it. And that's what my biggest fear is. And it's why it's so important. Can we sustain this for 3.5 years? Maybe there'll be some real damage done. But we have to make sure that, obviously we're keeping this torch alive so that when the next president comes, we can kind of relight it, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that. Thank you. Jesse, you reemerged because that means that we have questions from the audience.
Question time. You got it. You're starting to get the hang of it here. Thank you so much, everybody. This has been an amazingly powerful conversation. I got some folks here in the room with me that are like, hell yeah. So thank you. But Wowman542 asks, and I think Jolly, it'd be great to hear from you on this one, given your comments earlier. What can be done to reach and change the minds of veterans who unironically support the collapse of democracy in favor of a Christian theocracy?
Oof. We have another 30 or 40-minute panel. We can start over for this question. I mean,
yeah, in a month or next week, maybe.
Yeah. The problem is, I think myself, I've watched family members who have fallen down the cult rabbit hole. People who I know are good people who, I've loved my whole life. And I don't know that I can get through to my family members to drag them out of the cult of personality, which is MAGA. So how do we get veterans? I don't know, but this might not be the answer that the commenter wanted, but I'm going to be blunt and honest in my answer. I don't actually give a fuck anymore. I think that the 50-meter target is saving America. I think that if, there's an old story, you might have heard it, that Harriet Tubman, everybody knows Harriet Tubman, I hope you know Harriet Tubman, General Harriet Tubman, who led the Underground Railroad. And there was people who would delay her progress when they were moving people across the Underground Railroad. And the story goes that she would shoot them. And I'm not saying shoot anybody. I'm just saying that when we're trying to save America, when democracy is literally in the fire pit and the flames are high, I'm not here to convince the assholes who should already know better. In my opinion, if you serve this country, if you've been overseas, if you've seen how these allyships work, the congressman just got finished talking about our relationship with other countries. Dude, one of the most all striking things that I experienced while being in the military was watching how strong our bonds and allyships were with some of these other countries and how important that was. Some of the coolest things I went through was ceremonies where, as a soldier, I hated standing in fucking formation for 30 minutes, but it was cool to watch how my country and another country were so bonded through shit that happened before I was even born. And so to have this guy show up, this bag of mashed potatoes, Donald Trump, who just shows up and just shits all over everything that we've had for 50, 60, 80, 100 years. I don't think we recover from this anytime soon. I don't think we get these relationships back very easy. So for veterans who should already know better to be licking the boots, fuck them.
Jesse, do you mind if I speak to that for just a second?
No, please. I'm just going to ask Jason Janessa if he had something to say. Go ahead.
I think it's really important when we think about how to persuade vets ideologically to remember that the fact that a slight majority of veterans lean conservative, or in this case toward Trump, it shouldn't be an indictment of them as veterans. Like, I don't want people to be too discouraged about it. I want people to remember that if you show me any American workplace where the vast majority of the people who work there are men, and it is disproportionately drawn from the South and the Midwest and from rural areas, I'm going to say to you, that's probably a pretty Republican-leaning workplace. And so it's important to remember that, yes, these folks we're talking about are veterans, but they probably went into the military with parents who were conservative and parents who have been voting Republican, and they probably went home to a community of people who were voting Republican in a lot of these cases. So while I think it is important to appeal to them as veterans and to talk about America's leadership in the world and to talk about the fact that when we were in the military, we had socialized medicine, housing, and food. And so, this rough, rugged individualism, this fiction that we've come up with, maybe a little further from the truth than we might remember it. I think it's also important to, as Jolly was saying, to remember that at the end of the day, it's math, and what we need is 50% plus one. And so if you identify somebody who doesn't seem persuadable, whether they're a veteran or not, focus on the person next to them. Perhaps their spouse is persuadable. That's been my approach, is to remember that they're drawn from a more conservative base. And just sort of in the defense of veterans, it's not like the military made us conservative. A lot of people went in that way.
Yeah, I'll double tap on that, which is just to say that, in the 2020 election cycle, veterans were the second largest demographic to shift to Democrats. So that was obviously they shifted back, as did many other demographics in 2024. But veterans are, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, we are multifaceted individuals. I am more than just a Marine Corps veteran. I'm a woman, I'm a Californian, I'm a skateboarder, a lot of other things, as is everyone else on this call. And so there is a persuadable slice of folks in every demographic, and it's important to speak to folks through those frames, but also not just write off entire populations because of jobs that we've had in the past.
If I can say one thing for 10, 15 seconds, just so I can clarify, because listening to how you responded, I agree with both of you. Obviously we want to persuade anybody. I'm just saying that I really want us to also all remember that I truly think we're in the middle of a democratic collapse. I really think that we're not even yet feeling all the things that are a result of what Trump has done. And we do need to build community. Building community is the number one thing we can do right now. But we need to be ready to literally save America. I guess that's the message I was trying to get across.
Amen. Time to get wide awake. Okay, one question here, and I think to some of the folks that might be working in the political arena, this question is just coming up a lot. A lot of folks want to take action. They're feeling a little bit overwhelmed by the current political situation. But this question is from Michelle Green. I had the pleasure to hear Mr. Kinzinger speak last week in Park City. How do we get someone like Mike Lee out of office in an almost totally red state?
Who's that question for?
Anybody wants to take it, but you were mentioned in case you have any thoughts. Yeah.
Listen, I mean, that's a tough fight, honestly. I mean, there's sometimes we just have to embrace reality. I just spoke to a group last night, and I made the point, look, for the next year and a half, and actually if you were in Park City, I think Reed Galen made this point. For the next year and a half, we have to embrace the fact that it's going to suck, right? Embrace the suck here. I mean, that doesn't mean that we sit back on our haunches. In fact, the opposite of it. So if you think back to the Tea Party in 2010, the Tea Party got going in the equivalent of August of this year. And that's when you saw this massive rise of protests and everything else. That's already started. That's important because what you do by compelling members of Congress to have town halls or making it uncomfortable when they don't, is you remind them, you're going through the process of reminding them that they don't work for Donald Trump. That's the key, because they think they work for Donald Trump. I mean, I've heard my old colleagues say, I have to do what Donald Trump tells me. That means you think you work for him. So that's why things like that are important. I think, but it's understanding, here's the most important thing I can give you right now. That burden you all have on your shoulder that I carry too, to save the whole country right now, drop that burden. Because the reality is we all have to do this together. It's not on your shoulders alone. And the enemy we're battling, the chaos energizes them. They love the chaos. So they're doing Adderall and cocaine every day on the chaos. For us, we get exhausted by it. So that's why it's so important for us to take time for our mental health, to use that word, to say, if I need to check out for 5 days, I'm going to check out for 5 days. Because the one thing that's going to guarantee we lose is if you lose hope. And so I think that's the most important thing I can say. Put the pressure on them, but don't lose hope. Because when you lose hope, then I think it really does make it really tough to win at that point.
And just to put a finer point on it, we need to embrace the suck. We need to be ready, for I think you said next year and a half. What are we trying to get to in the long term, from your point of view?
From my point of view, we're trying to get to 2028. Look, 2026 is the time where we can put a roadblock out there. Now, so far, the good news is the courts have seemed to hold. That's a good thing. I think we should celebrate that. Now, there's always going to be the question because they kind of have already ignored the courts, but it's like kind of iffy because they said you have to try to facilitate. So that the big question is going to be what happens when they do a full-blown ignoring of the Supreme Court. But our key here is to get to 2026. My recommendation to Democrats is this: pay attention to men. Start actually talking to men because that's the demographic, as Jason was talking about. I think it was Jason that mentioned that you're losing. And get back the middle class voter. And this may be a 5 to 10 year project, but that Bill Clinton voter, the ones who voted Democrat when I got elected, that ended up all being Republicans, those are the people we have to go back and win. So win the House, give a shot at the Senate. That's a tough battle. And then the big key is 2028. And I'll just say to finish that up, whoever's president in 2028 needs to spend the first year clawing back the damage that's been done, and the next 3 to 7 years putting guardrails in place to make sure this shit never happens again. That's what I think.
Jesse, if I could add one other thing to that, which is, if we're going to talk about corruption in this administration, we need to be able to look pretty hard at the whole political ecosystem. There is a reason that more people didn't vote for either candidate than voted in the last election. People feel like the system is rigged. And I think that Democrats have a substantially different message and intent than the MAGA right. But when we don't pass legislation to allow members of Congress to trade stocks, when we're not willing to point out some of that corruption and rot in our own institutions, we lose credibility. So I think we can't just be against Trump and the MAGA right. We also need to be for things that matter to people in their day-to-day lives. We need to be communicating about that, not just reacting to Donald Trump and the chaos that, as the congressman said, is just the thing that's feeding their movement. And we need to put that vision out there equally as aggressively as we are fighting in the courts and in the realm of public opinion.
If I could also add real quick. So if you want something different that you've never had before, you have to do things you've never done before. And this desire by Democrats to stick to the old way and do the old things is not working. I mean, listen to the people that are voting for you. 77% of Democratic voters care about what's happening in Gaza. Democrats refuse to fucking talk about it. It's a genocide. And then now we're listening to Trump say, well, Israel is trying to drag me into a war. No shit, dude. And so like we're not listening to the base. We're catering to this moderate idea. Maybe I can catch the Republican voters who don't want Trump no more. What about the voters that want to vote for you? Listen to what they're saying. Fix the health care. Yeah, and we're talking about veterans, and I think that veteran health care is so important. But might I just add that health care for everyone is important. Housing for everyone is important. Veterans are more privileged of a demographic. We selflessly served our country so that everybody would have housing and healthcare and the things that we care about, not just us when we get out. So I think that the Democrats need to dramatically change how they're doing things. Jasmine Crockett's up to be the ranking member of the Oversight Committee. Make her. It doesn't need to be this seniority thing. The next 76-year-old guy in line is not the guy. So Democrats need to shake up how they're doing things, listen to the people that will vote for them, listen to their base, and stop sticking to the old way that's not working anymore.
Amen. Thank you so much for that, Jolly. I mean, I think we're going to have a couple more panels, I think, on some of the topics you all have brought up. After the next one, there's a panel all about men and how we try to work them back into the party and back into the movement without sacrificing our values. That's going to be an important one. I really appreciate you all coming here. We have another one on how to fight coming up next with Senator Booker. But this has been incredibly inspiring to hear set of heroes who have served our country in various ways. And I think for me personally, I'm inspired because it's going to take all of the above approach. And I think we're going to have to keep going now, come together, keep having these conversations. So thank you. I'd love to give you all a chance to plug where folks can find you, what they should be doing. So we could go around quickly. Jason, where can we find your podcasts?
I co-host the Majority 54 podcast on the Midas Touch Network. So thanks for asking.
Any plugs for you, Janessa?
No, just if you want to get more involved and see what veterans are doing to fight back, votevets.org.
Congressman?
Yeah, I would say, look, my organization's Country First, country1st.com. And then follow me on Substack because I'm putting out some, some barn burners on that one. So,
Jolly?
I am Jolly Good Ginger on all social media platforms. And you can also find me in the streets of DC protesting this bullshit.
All right. And Ambassador, any closing words?
Oh, thanks, Jesse. Yeah, you can find me on all social as well, or I just had Rufus Gifford as my handle. But just thanks all. I love this conversation and really just appreciate so much that what this group of people have done to serve the country and just continuing to do, and because without a doubt this is service as well. So I appreciate you all very, very much, and I loved the conversation.
Thanks, everybody. We hope to see you again soon. Thanks for joining us.